long after birth until you can start running? What is your postpartum running plan? What postpartum exercises can you start doing? We have a problem in our society of women just going off and doing everything right away. And a lot of that comes from that they're cleared at 6 weeks by their provider, whether it's an OB or a midwife that says everything looks healed, you can return to fitness and return to sex. And as a women's health therapist, we typically like women to wait 8 to 12 weeks if they have a plan. Meaning that just because you hit 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks, it doesn't mean that you just go off for a 3-mile run. The plan is, have you worked on activating your deep core? Have you worked on pelvic stability, core stability, balance? And so if you have a plan, then starting to run at 8 to 12 weeks is gonna be a really great spot for you. I'm Dr. Nichelle Gurule with Loud Chiropractic and Coaching out of Lafayette, Colorado. I'm specialized in prenatal, postpartum, and pediatric chiropractic care, along with prenatal and postpartum fitness and rehab. And I am one of many women's health therapists. Some people are chiropractors who have an emphasis in rehab like myself. Some are pelvic floor PTs. And we're all on the same page that we really want women to give running a little bit longer of a timeline before they begin. 8 to 12 weeks is a safer zone than 6 weeks because we really want to make sure that the body is prepared for such a challenging sport. And it's a sport that a lot of people like doing. Now, why are we not okay with this 6-week timeline to be cleared for everything? Because that means that women are given the green light when really they should be given the yellow light, that a lot of healing has happened at 6 weeks, but there's still a lot of healing to do. And that pelvic floor and that core just in general needs more strength and endurance. It's gone through a lot over the course of pregnancy and a lot over the course of birth, whether it was a belly birth or a vaginal birth. They should be told, as opposed to a green light, you should still take it easy for a little bit longer. And you want to gradually and progressively return, and that you should see a women's health therapist. The ACOG agrees. The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology agrees that we need a new paradigm for postpartum care. So the first step is agreement, but now it needs to be implemented. So I'm here telling you about this now so you can understand why we want to implement change. We want more appointments beyond this 6 week for check-ins. We want better referrals to women health therapists who are going to work on that core system and helping women return to fitness and any movements they like doing optimally for their body for where they're at postpartum. Running is a tough one because running people really love, and it's one that we want to wait on that timeline closer to 8 to 12 weeks. And running is high impact, which means it's going to put a lot of impact on that pelvic floor and just the core in general. It requires a lot of pelvic stability because it's technically single stance. So we need to work on single stance work. It requires a lot of core stability, balance because of it being single stance, endurance of these muscles, pelvic floor, all of the core muscles. And we want to have optimal posture. So if we're rounded over from feeding our baby and holding our baby, and we have this curve of our back, it's going to make it harder to get a nice deep breath in. So we want mobility and good posture of our mid-back so we can take in a nice deep breath and get that oxygen so we're not having cramps or other issues result from not having good posture while we're running. But why 8 to 12 weeks? Why do we need to wait that long? Partially because this is a better healing timeline. You've healed so much more when you added another 2 to 6 weeks onto that 6-week clearance. It allows that initial fatigue of early motherhood to be less. It's down. You're a little bit more energized again if you wait a little longer. The bleeding should be gone at this point in time after birth. The hormones are starting to regulate a little bit more, and then it gives you more time to build up that core strength, that pelvic strength, the muscle endurance of the pelvic floor. So what symptoms do we want to look out for as we're returning to run? We want to look out for urinary incontinence or any incontinence for the matter, even fecal. So if you're leaking, whether it's prior to running, during running, or after running, we want to be aware of that. If you have pressure, heaviness, fatigue, dragging of that pelvic floor, we want to know about that. That's a symptom to be aware of, whether it's before, during, or after running. We want to check in on, has there been an increase in bleeding? Was bleeding stopped and now it started? Or was it still going and now it's even stronger? We want to be aware of that. But the really big ones are going to be the urinary incontinence or incontinence of any sort, and that pressure or heaviness. And then a big one as well is pain. If you're running and you're getting knee pain or pelvic pain or low back pain, we need more stability going on before we add more of that high impact sport. So where do we start? If you're wanting to run postpartum, I highly recommend finding a women's health therapist like myself, or again, a pelvic floor PT, to walk you through the steps so that you can be assessed in a proper way. And I'm gonna read to you for a moment the return to running guidelines. So what's really awesome is now there's more awareness, so there's starting to be more guidelines being set on this. So there's a lot of guidelines for prenatal fitness and very few for postpartum. So there's things that are beginning to start. And this is the return to running guidelines in their publication. And there's a lot within this, but a couple things that when they're doing an assessment and things that I do in my clinic is we're wanting to see if women can achieve the following pain without heaviness, dragging, or incontinence. So walking for 30 minutes. Can you walk for 30 minutes and not have that heaviness or any sensation like you're gonna leak or pain? Can you single leg balance for 10 seconds on both sides? Can you single leg squat? Can you jog for 1 minute on the spot? Again, without feeling any of those symptoms we talked about, the heaviness, the leaking, the pain, any bleeding. Forward bounds, so jumping forward, hopping in place. Should be able to do 10 hops like this without feeling any sensation in that pelvic floor. Single leg running man. And then we have the strength. So that was more of a challenge with impact and what's going on the pelvic floor. But do the muscles of the pelvic stability and core have the ability to go running? So strength testing, things like single leg calf raises, single leg bridges, single leg sit to stand. So you're sitting and can stand up. 20 reps of each of those without being challenged too much. Sideline abduction. So you're on your side and your legs are coming out like this. So those are just a few examples of some strength training and some challenges to that pelvic floor to see if you're ready to start running. So that when you go running, you're not always having leaking issues with running, you're not always having pain, and you're setting yourself up for success. Because the body goes through a lot during pregnancy. It has so many transitions. A lot goes and happens to the core during birth. So we really want to set you up for success. So after an assessment, we want to start working on breath. The breath gets off quite a bit because the diaphragm gets locked up because baby's taking up that space, and that diaphragm's fatigued after birth because it's being worked so much with all the deep breathing that happens during birth. So we want to get that breath pattern back. A nice deep breath, a nice rib cage breath to make sure that you're getting good oxygen as you're running. We want to tune into posture. We want to check things out like balance, like I mentioned in the running guidelines. Can you balance here for 10 seconds? Can you balance here for 10 seconds with your eyes closed? I like adding in the single leg arc, seeing how is your balance with this movement. Is your pelvis up really high? Are your feet wobbling a lot? Is your knee dipping in? Are your toes gripping the ground? We want this balance movement to be nice and easy. And if it's not, that's okay. We're going to work towards it. So balance is key. Doing something balancing, whether it's single leg arc like I just showed you, or single leg balance test, we want to get that balance back because we lose a lot of that as our body goes through so many structural transitions. We want to be able to connect to our deep core. Can you easily tell your body to turn on your transverse abdominis, the deepest abdominal wall layer? Can you tell your body to activate the pelvic floor, and does it do it? What's the endurance of that pelvic floor? The Return to Running Guidelines has a whole list of what the pelvic floor should be able to do. Can you do 10 quick reps? Can you do 6 to 8 reps in a row or 10 reps in a row of 6 to 8 second holds? Can you hold for 60 seconds at a minimal contraction of a 30-50% contraction? So those are things we want to tune into is what's the endurance of that pelvic floor and that transverse? Are you connected to them? So we want to rebuild that connection because the core is really paramount to running. We want to make sure that that mid-back is mobile. So maybe you're doing cat-cows on the ground. We want to make sure the hips are mobile, but we also want to make sure that there's good stability. So we want to strengthen the pelvis. How can we do that? We can take a band. We can work on lateral walks. We can do squats where we're pressing out against the band and squatting. Glute bridges, deadlifts. The list goes on. The point being is that we want to work on that pelvic stability and that pelvic strength because it plays a big role in running. We also want to start adding impact. So where we might work on the glute medius, which is a nice hip stabilizer. So we might do things like side lunges or clams or single leg bridges. Those are great for building up the stability, but now we want to add impact. So maybe you can start adding lateral jumps so the pelvic floor gets used to it. You can start playing around with a few jumps on one leg You can have them go to a stair and you can jump off. So there's a lot of different things you can do to add impact to start preparing that pelvic floor for running, which is impact with every step. So after you've gone through and you've got your breath down well, you got your posture down well, your balance is great, you've reconnected to your core, you feel great with core stability and pelvic stability and impact. Now it's time to see what's up for the run. But the run, you shouldn't just go out on a 3-mile run. Ideally, you'll go out on a run that's 2 minutes, walk for 5. 2 minutes running, walk for 5, and see, do you have any leaking? Do you have any heaviness or dragging? Any pain? So we're always touching in with those symptoms. And just to finalize the return to running postpartum and what you can do, a couple tips. If you're breastfeeding or producing milk, so you're pumping and feeding baby, a good bra will be helpful. And making sure that you pump before or feed your baby before so that they're not heavy. And then finding a good bra that will support the new breast that you have will be really ideal for you. So how long after birth until you can run? The answer is really roughly 8 to 12 weeks if you have a plan, and really basing things off of the symptoms that you're feeling.